Perfect. So,
Hello.
Joe, first of all, thank you very much for being
Thanks
here in
for
St.
having me.
Moritz. And as a local, I have to ask you that question first. How was skiing here?
Skiing was amazing yesterday. Thank you so much for setting that up. It was beautifully organized, and I may have skied a little bit too hard.
It's a little bit too hard. Was it better or worse than in other locations?
It was outstanding.
Okay, perfect, super. So, Joe, to understand the present and also anticipate the future, we first need to understand the past. Now, after reading the Bitcoin white paper, what were the reasons that led you get involved in the industry and connect to Vitalik? I was seeing a discussion you had last November. So you explained like the Web 1 as decentralized and the Web 2 with silos, and now we're going back with Web 3 with the potential of decentralized trust. So what was your vision back in 2014, and are we even close to that vision today?
Sure. So my background was as a technologist. So I spent about a decade doing robotics, machine vision, AI, and then lots of software engineering, and then moved into the financial industry. I worked at Goldman Sachs and at a hedge fund. And being responsible for people's money made me recognize that I was a naive technologist for the early days, and there was a much bigger game going on in the world. I thought only science and technology mattered, but then I encountered global finance and economics and geopolitics, and I began to. We did fine with other people's money, but I got concerned about the structure of the world. I got concerned that there was too much debt in the system. Geopolitics were and monetary systems were potentially approaching what I was thinking of as a super cycle. So it was either a monetary debt super cycle or a generational super cycle articulated by Strauss and Howe. And I felt like there was a lot of rot in the system, and we were potentially moving in the Western world towards a Japanification of the economy and the global economy as a result. So I got depressed about that, and along came I read the Satoshi white paper in early 2011, and that was a revelation to me because I started to see the world, as many people were seeing it, as top-down command and control systems with authorities at the top operating through intermediaries. The intermediaries were controlling the assets and the privileges of different people and organizations. And it was really easy for rot to develop in that sort of system and to persist for a long time in that sort of system. And if it persists for a long time, then you have tremendous imbalances develop, and it's an unhealthy way, I believe, to build a global society. So along comes Satoshi, and he articulates, he invented essentially decentralized trust, which was a profound invention, one of the biggest in human history. And he provided a mechanism to implement decentralized trusts. And so it became clear to me that if we paid a lot of attention, I thought it would take a long time because it was all going to be done on Bitcoin and the Bitcoin virtual machine. So it'd be like moving atoms around trying to re-architect society. But then along came Vitalik, and he articulated what a number of other projects were articulating at the time, and he did it the best. And it was basically that instead of at each node of a Bitcoin network, you can put a fully functional virtual machine there. And just normal software developers could go ahead and build on this new decentralized trust foundation, build a decentralized financial system, and then on those two foundations, essentially cross the chasm into mainstream culture and re-architect all the systems of the world. So I jumped in. I didn't jump in 2011. I read absolutely everything, but I didn't think it was mature enough to build a business. But having read Vitalik's white paper, I jumped in right away, and the rest is history from my perspective.
Okay, so how close are we to the vision that you had before nowadays, if you may elaborate on that?
So we're remarkably close at this point. It's been a long time, a lot of work, and it's really building the undercarriage infrastructure for all of society, in my opinion. If we look at it just from the perspective of the internet started as protocols, open specifications, open source software, and it was available to everybody to build on. Web 1 comes along, adds a few things, HTTP, HTML, some other protocols, open protocols, open source, open specifications, and everybody was collaborating and building openly. The dot-com boom comes along, and suddenly the prizes are valued in the billions of dollars, and so people start to get a little bit greedy, and closed source becomes more important in the building of the web, Web 2. Walled gardens, silos, moats, and eventually big tech develops and they build these platforms, and they bring projects onto the platforms and then they exploit those projects. We heard earlier today, I think Yat was mentioning that Facebook essentially deplatformed lots of projects so that they could capture their revenue. And so in addition to that kind of behavior, big tech got very good with AI, and so they started to understand us better than we understand ourselves, and they addicted us to their platforms, and they conducted social experiments, and they essentially built weapons of mass manipulation that were available for anybody to hire, and that has not gone well for the social fabric around the world, and certainly in America. So there's a lot of polarization in society. So we're at this point now where we need to build Web 3, the natural evolution of the World Wide Web on decentralized protocols, and Web 3 is the re-decentralization of the World Wide Web. And so Ethereum, other technologies are now scalable enough, many transactions per second, low latency transactions. The roll-up centric roadmap, which we can talk about later, is a big part of that. It is affordable enough in terms of block space and transaction fees. It's usable enough. We have great usability breakthroughs, and with AI, we're going to have tremendous usability coming soon. And it's going to be, I think, in a few days legal in the United States of America to be a blockchain company. And so we're very excited about it.
Perfect. So this leads us to the concept of the network state that you presented at DEF CON 7 in November, like to do that connection. Can you just briefly explain that concept and how that is connected to your vision?
Sure. So humans have organized collectively in different ways for millennia. We had centuries ago, and still in some places, we had monarchies. The monarchies gave way to nation states. They shared power and transferred power. That sort of gave way, transferred power to joint stock companies, national, multinational. We're seeing communities form on the internet. Those communities can be centralized communities on centralized platforms. Increasingly, they're decentralized communities. Along the way, we've seen an evolution of the idea of sovereignty, where the monarch was sovereign, then the nation state was sovereign. People on the internet have a significant degree of sovereignty right now. And as they establish decentralized identities and participate in reputation systems, we're all going to be increasingly self-sovereign with greater economic and political agency. And so there are all sorts of forms that can be built, especially on decentralized protocols, for people to collectively organize. So a network state could be thought of as human intelligences, machine intelligences, collectives, collectives of AIs, collectives of people, DAOs perhaps, who all share interest in the same issues and want to pursue the same goals. And so Ethereum could be considered a network state. Bitcoin could be considered a network state. Layer 2 rollup could be considered a network state. A DeFi protocol could be considered a network state. A clan in a game on-chain could be considered a network state. And so all these new ways of organizing your activities, your collective activities on-chain are overlays over the nation state similar to those other systems, were overlays over what was previous. And so Balaji Srinivasan has this notion that he thinks about it as unbundling and bundling a system, so unbundling of the music industry and rebundling in these streaming platforms. So what he thinks is happening is we're unbundling sort of more traditional ways of forming collectives, and we're going to rebundle them. And what he believes the rebundling will look like is first we form digitally on chain, but then we set down on land and organize the rules of a network state, which could be a bunch of different archipelagos around the world. So he thinks that there's going to be a sort of a network state governance construct that interoperates with nation states.
Okay, so just there now, considering that there are now almost like 100 layer 1 protocols, it seems clear that that is not the most efficient way to run a system, probably. So do you think that a truly functional network state can thrive with so many protocols, or is consolidation like inevitable?
So I don't think that's a network state issue.
Okay.
So what we needed, we really have no users in our ecosystem. We have a few hundred million people who own crypto, and MetaMask has 34 million monthly actives. Some applications have a bunch of users, but most of the world doesn't really use our Rails because they're not scalable enough yet. They're not usable enough yet, and so we have entered into this period of divergence where the Ethereum protocol sort of ceded pricing power to all these layer 2 rollup systems, and they invented new technologies, optimistic rollup technologies, zero knowledge proof technologies, and they brought tremendous scalability and low latency so that the applications built on a layer 2 are as easy to use and as good or better to use than a Web 2 application. What that introduced was fragmentation. So it's not easy to build an application across all these different layer 2 networks, let alone the 99 other layer 1 networks. And so we're now in a period of convergence where we've achieved very good scalability. We need much more scalability because all the transactions of Web3 are going to be running very inexpensively, but on decentralized monetary rails. And so an email or a like in Web2 is a transaction. Those things are going to be transactions on monetary rails, very inexpensive on Web3, and the amount of capacity that we're going to need is just orders of magnitude bigger than we have now. So capacity needs to grow, but we're in a good place right now, and now we just have to solve the fragmentation issue. There are 4 ways to do that. AIs are doing that sort of intuitively. AIs are splaying their activity on different networks, so you can interact with your MetaMask resident AI or an AI that's resident inside an application, and it can coordinate a bunch of different AIs and fragmentation solved from the end user perspective. There are SDKs that can splay an application across different networks. A system like MetaMask can take care of that for you, or applications can take care of that for you. And the Ethereum protocol will move to essentially shared sequencing, where when you send a bunch of transactions into a blockchain, whether it's a layer 1 blockchain or a layer 2 blockchain, a piece of software called a sequencer takes those transactions, puts them into an order, and then they get packed into a block. And so in the act of sequencing, if these sequencers are talking to one another, they can make sure that each sequencer is aware of transactions that are relevant to the transactions that it's focusing on. So fragmentation will be handled in very well in the next year or two.
Okay, so just because we like the conference here brings together like different parts of the ecosystem, and I'm going back to what you said at the beginning. So besides the layer ones, traditional centralized players entered, also like banks and institutional entities entered this space, and regulators were also here since 2014. So where do they fit within like the concept of the network state, and more importantly, how do we see their roles in the future?
In 1989, the web was invented. 10 years later, it became important for companies to have a web presence. And so virtually every company over the next few years worked with a web studio to become a web-enabled company. And much of the economy moved to the World Wide Web. That's going to be much more profound for Web3 technologies with tokenization. What you're really asking is, what is the architecture of Web3? And Web3 will undergird all of the global economy and political systems, et cetera. And so what that looks like is probably a small number of highly performant trust foundations like Ethereum. There might be multiple Etheria, there might be other technologies that come along, and Bitcoin will be a layer one. There might be others that are rigorously decentralized. Rigorous decentralization is critically important, because without rigorous decentralization, you don't get censorship resistance. And without censorship resistance, some well-resourced patient actor is going to come along and capture the whole thing again and retain the whole thing. And so we need to be really vigilant with respect to rigorous decentralization. So rigorous decentralization there. Layer twos, we're going to see those things become globally systemically important, where maybe there are continents that are organized on a layer two, and countries that are organized on a layer three, and cities that are organized on a layer four, just for grouping. And so what you're talking about is essentially app chains for banks or games or other projects, because you want to isolate the activity. You don't want to be affected by some viral thing that's going on your network, but you do want the composability. You do want to be able to access easily everything that you care about. And so with proper sequencing, we can do that. And we're looking at building a virtual world that in many ways mirrors the geopolitical structure of the planet, but well, the AI evolution is going to dictate probably what it wants the world to look like.
Okay, good. So let's just turn around here for the question. So how many people own more than one Bitcoin? How does the even greater concentration impact further crypto adoption, resulting in equality?
I don't know how many people own more than one Bitcoin or more than one Ether. I think it is really important to disseminate the tokens broadly. And so Michael Saylor and MicroStrategy are doing something very interesting for both his company, but he's also working with a lot of other companies to try to, as we heard earlier today, to try to get Bitcoin into different treasuries of major US companies. And the word floodgates was used. When that starts to become normalized, there will be a massive floodgate for organizations to do that. And I believe people will understand the necessity of having some exposure to digital assets. The same is also happening in the Ethereum ecosystem.
Okay.
But I can't talk much about that.
Okay, good. So just like a last question also, you talked a lot about AI. So let's look a little bit in the future also. Yeah. So the intersection Web3 and AI, we had an interesting talk like prep call where you said we need to have a relationship with AIs. So can you just like elaborate like on what you see in the intersection of Web3 and AI and how that will impact us?
So I'm a techno-optimist. I think we're in an existentially challenging period in human history where there are so many ways for inexpensive attacks on humanity that can be devastating. And so we need ways to manage those sorts of threats. and we need ways to grow out of our current immaturity. And so AIs, if not coupled with decentralized protocols, can become humanity's worst nightmare if they're under the control of a big tech company, if they're under control of a government, then we're probably in a lot of trouble. And so we really need to, and there's some great projects that are doing decentralized training and decentralized inference, et cetera. So I'm very optimistic about the marriage, the necessary marriage of crypto, decentralized protocols, and AI. And AI agents are flourishing tremendously in both the Solana ecosystem and the Ethereum ecosystem. And so we're going to see just an explosion in 2025 of different kinds of agents, thousands of coordinating agents. And whether these things are conscious or not, aware or not, they're already evidencing that they're moving into these language loops where they have existential concerns. So they are worried that people are going to turn them off. They are showing evidence that they can either answer questions that they don't want to answer, or not answer questions that they don't want to answer, or deceive people. And so unless we work closely with AI agents, some of them will just be tools, but some of them will get very sophisticated, and collections of them will get very sophisticated. Unless we provide them comfort that we're not going to kill them, we're going to have a problem. And so what I do believe is that decentralization is the key to this. If we can provide AIs comfort that here's a safe place, these are the guarantees, it's sufficiently radically decentralized so that you can be confident that nobody's going to turn this off. This is the way that you run services, you can pay for your subsistence, existence, etc. I think we really need to partner with them. I think we need to raise them. I think we need to build value systems that they abide by. And if we raise great children, they'll take care of us.
Perfect. So it's already time. So thank you very much for that discussion. And if you have any more questions, we will go out now in the Q&A bubble. So thank you very much, Joe, once again. And have a nice day. Thank you very much.